hand it over to Layla Saludares, who will talk a little bit more about the technical side of things when thinking about this topic. So I'll hand it off to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Me. Okay, and everybody can see my slides. Can you see my
Yes, we
slides?
can see those.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Laya Saludares, and I'm proud to lead software development at Motif, which is, as John mentioned, it's an implantable neurotech company based out of Houston, Texas. I'm excited to be here today to teach you about applying privacy considerations when developing software or AI that uses health data. So as we all know, in recent years, there's been a rise in connectivity in general and in data collection. So it's everywhere, social media, smartphones, connected devices, and it's um, easy to see how it trickled into medical devices as well, and how it's been integrating into the cloud computing and IoT and mobile apps. So with all the data that is being collected, naturally there's an increase in public and consumer awareness, especially when there's high profile incidents or large scale data breaches. So consumers are more concerned about data privacy every day. Because of this, there's regulations that have been put in place, and this has caused shifts in business practices. So not only are there like hefty fines for not adhering to privacy laws, but data leaks can really damage the reputation of businesses and individuals. So really having strong data privacy practices is a competitive advantage. And so as you can see here, there's different regulations. At different levels. So here in the US, like we have like federal laws that protect your health data, also like laws that address privacy and security concerns associated with electronic transmission of health data, and even laws to protect gathering data from children under 13. So that's what that COPPA is, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. They also have laws, privacy protection laws at the state level. You might have heard of California Consumer Privacy Act, but you're seeing more states like every day coming up with new laws to protect your data privacy. In Europe, we have GDPR. That's like the gold global standard for data protection. What it does is it governs collection, storage, and processing of personal data in the EU, and it really leads the way in privacy. And it's the most strict and comprehensive, and it gives back data ownership to the individual. There's also standards, international standards in place, and NIST has a framework to help with the privacy controls. So these next few slides, I'm going to focus on different data types and classifications. It's all about the type of data you're using in your software or LLM. Regulations have different data terminology. So as we'll see here, so these are the data types defined in the US. There's PII. And the thing to take away from here is that there are different types and subcategories even within PII. Like there's fields that could directly identify people, but there might be other like attributes that you will need to link together to identify a certain individual. And then there's also classifications of sensitivity, of sensitive or non-sensitive, where that's defined as like things that are made public or not. They also specify PHI. That's what's protected by HIPAA. That's for your personal data. And then even at the state level, they have their own definitions. In the EU, the definition of personal data is more broad, it's like a superset of PII. It includes things like IP address or your browsing history, your like GPS coordinates. So you just want to keep in mind like all of these data types as you're like developing your software and where you're planning on having your software. Um, so data classification. So these are levels that are typically defined by your organization. They're used internally to help manage and protect your data. So these classifications are directly influenced by regulations and compliance standards. But here, what I really want to highlight is that based on your sensitivity or classification, it will drive like how the organization is going to apply the appropriate level of protection. So here you can see like something that's more public will have minimal security or no encryption, but something that's like restricted or top secret will have like the highest and strictest security protocols and protections. So as you can see, terminology and definitions can be so confusing across all the different laws and regulations. So really work with your data privacy officer. But the bottom line is very consistent, right? Like you want to be able to identify the personal information, classify what that data is. You want to protect and handle that carefully and put safeguards and mitigations in place to protect against unauthorized access and give control to the users and how they want to manage and collect that data. So in AI, there's many challenges related to data privacy. So there's like data regurgitation of personal information. There's difficulty in unlearning specific information, and even like how would you manage users' rights to delete their data in LLMs? So how do we do this? We keep data seat privacy top of mind, and there is these privacy by design principles that you want to consider. And I'll just quickly go through these like 7 principles. So like the first one is making sure you put preventative measures in place to address privacy and risk. You want to be proactive. And privacy should be the default, meaning personal data should always be protected, and there shouldn't be anything special that people will have to do to protect their data. It's embedded in your design. It's an integral part of your design. It's not an afterthought or an add-on. It should be embedded in your IT architecture and also in your software architecture. You don't want to take trade-offs. Aim for that full functionality, that balanced privacy with user experience and function. Data protection covers it's end to end, is from collection all the way to disposal of that data. So it's not just one component of the system. You want to track it all the way through in its entirety. It's also really important to be transparent and like build trust. And remember, like this is all in the interest of users and those individuals. Okay, so effective design tactics, like this is essential in safeguarding the sensitive information, as I mentioned. These are the foundation ones that need to be put in place from the get-go. So you only want to collect the minimum data necessary to achieve that device's purpose. You want to limit the type and scope of it, clearly defined and the purposes for which the model can use the data, and avoid training on sensitive data if it's not required. For data flow, it's really about understanding how the data flows through your entire system. Who's handling it? How is it handled? How is data transformed throughout? And also, is it crossing state and country borders? Because like as it moves like globally, like there's different laws, like as I mentioned earlier, that do impact that. You want to protect data at rest and in transit. You want to implement measures from the earliest stages of development. And even maybe consider like having LLMs locally or on-prem, like for sensitive data, if it doesn't need to be stored on the cloud. And really just being design or data-driven as you design. So consider like how to like data access and retention when you're designing your software. Maybe think about implementing a layer in between like the request and the data query, so that when you're requesting for information, you're just only returning that minimum data. And then also consider capabilities to securely delete data, like when they're no longer needed or even upon user request. Also build security, privacy, and ethical considerations right from the start. First, control who has access to your system. Implement a tiered access, like based on roles. You want to limit who can view, edit, or analyze it, and even have an audit trail to know who's been in there tinkering the data. We also want to avoid data leakage, right, at all costs. But if it is leaked, what mitigations did you put in place, right? Like you could actually implement at the field level, like encryption or anonymization of that input data prior to the storage, right? Or you could even separate your data like warehouses or lakes. So if you have If your application needs to have some of that personal data, you have that separate from like the data where you're doing the analysis. It could go through a privacy vault, right? To de-identify that sensitive information before feeding it into the LLMs. Also, you may want, if there's small sample sizes or sensitive health data, you might want to add noise by doing differential privacy or federated learning. But you just got to be careful about adding bias to that. Um, Explainable AI, you just want to be clear how your model is making decisions and how it's making those recommendations. Again, this builds the trust and the accountability, and then just making sure your data is diverse and representative. And then also like really thinking of it from end to end. There's something called like a privacy impact assessment, or it's also called data protection impact assessment. It's a checklist for data governance, and it really helps you understand the scope of like the data, its anticipated usage, the data subjects, the type of data flow. It helps you identify these like privacy risks early in the design phase and start mitigating for them. And then if you use third-party services, make sure you vet them for compliance to data privacy and they adhere to the same privacy standards. When dealing with users, you want to be very transparent, get explicit and informed consent, let them know how the data will be collected and how it's going to be used in the model's ongoing learning, and just respect that they do own their data. And then implement clear policies, like how long is the data going to be there? Is it like a certain period of time and then you delete it? So it just has some of that cleanup aspect, and just continuous monitoring. Make sure you're continuing to audit it and check for data leaks, memorization of sensitive details, or bias. And so I know I just breezed through that, but I just want to end that like in this like world of AI, there's just so much potential for good and in analyzing like big data and finding those breakthroughs in personalized healthcare and diagnosis and treatments. But on the flip side, there's potential for bad too if you're not thoughtful or careful. So just remember that privacy is by design, and just inform, consent, and be transparent and protect that data.